Hello, Void Dwellers. Following the recent ruling by the Supreme Court here in Britain, which dictates that the word woman, from a legal point of view, refers only to biologically born women, a lot of things have been said from both sides of the controversy. Now, I'll be honest here, I usually veer away from that subject. I mentioned it in passing in a couple of my videos, but it's not a subject I usually give an opinion on, because quite frankly, when I first became aware of the issue, I felt like I had nothing to say. As a man, it just felt remote from me and didn't feel like I knew enough about the science or the experience of people to talk about it. Also, I think a part of it came from the fact that in Israel, that never was such a big deal to begin with. I mean, we sent a transgender woman to represent us in the Eurovision all the way back in 1998. And she actually won that here. So in Israel, while it was considered a very, very rare phenomenon, it was viewed as kind of a, people didn't really care that much this way or another. At least that was the atmosphere when I grew up. Gay people were far more often discussed than trans people. And I think part of it came from the fact that transgenders in Judaism and in general in Middle Eastern cultures are not considered anything offensive or problematic. If you are a woman and you date men, even if you started off as a man, as far as the culture is concerned, that's kinda okay. Which is why even in Iran, transgender women are far safer than gay men, and why unfortunately a lot of gay men force the change upon themselves to avoid persecution and death. Anyway, the point is, I never felt that as a man who is very far removed from the issue, I should have an opinion. I only got interested when a woman I deeply respect, J.K. Rowling, started talking about it in the context of women's rights, which I was always a great supporter of. So I started reading and listening to people from both sides of the argument, and pretty soon I came to the conclusion that it's a conversation between deaf people. And there's a move here from bullies to muscle one group out at the expense of the other. And both sides have those bullies. And both sides are not being reasonable and are allowing themselves to be dragged into the extreme margins by the bullies. Instead of validating both experiences of biological women and transgender women and discussing the difficulties of both and finding some common ground, it became a case of all or nothing, because the stupid human creature never fails to be stupid. And then the 7th of October happened, and I was changed forever. Whereas in the past, I definitely considered myself a feminist because I view it as part of humanism, and if you believe in equality and human rights for everyone, yeah, that includes women. Following the 7th of October and the fact that hundreds of Israeli women and girls were raped to death, and that the hostages were sexually assaulted, and that these assaults were documented both by the terrorists and by inquiries by the UN and other world governments, and to this moment, no fucking Western feminist organization has ever condemned those attacks. In fact, there are so-called feminists online who put out opinion pieces and videos ranging from claiming that all Jewish women are liars when they say they have been raped, yeah, me too unless you're a Jew, to Jewish women deserve to be raped because they're colonialists. Therefore, I became less of a feminist and more of a Jewish feminist. In short, I became kind of apathetic to the problems of Western women because they do not count Jewish women as part of them and they do not give a shit about them. And you know what? There are billions of them and only 16 million Jews in total, so about 8 million Jewish women. So now I am concerned with the rights of Jewish women, and I will only support organizations specifically supporting Jewish women. However, I did find it interesting that the trans issue and the pro-Palestinian, or as it actually is, the pro-antisemitism issue, are so often mixed together. For example, in the latest protest against the Supreme Court's ruling, there were people chanting "One fight, Palestine and trans right," which is hilarious to me as someone who supported groups in Israel that try to get asylum status to Palestinian gays and transgenders, because in their culture it means death and in Israel they have rights. That shows you the level of idiocy and twisted dark hatred that those activists have towards Jews, and apparently women as well. Basically anyone chanting that was saying we hate Jews and we hate women. That's it. That's the message. And I think that the tying of the two issues demonstrates something quite important and unique to our time. The way that the persecuted has been turned into the villain in the mainstream. This is 101 Nazi propaganda, by the way, and I don't mean to say propaganda against Jews. I mean, this is how the Nazis operated. That was their MO. To take a persecuted minority, Jews, gay people, Romani people, blacks, people with disabilities, and present them as this evil threat on the country to raise the mob's anger. Look at this picture here from one of the latest demonstrations. Bring back witch burning. They bring back this medieval attitude, this kind of violence that they won't see used again against women who don't fall in line. Now, the way to fall in line has changed, yeah, sure, but the pattern remains the same. And I love that it has hearts on it, because it's part of my point. These days, as long as you make your slogan look like a Care Bear wrote it, you can be as violent and as hateful as you want. Ban women, murder all Jews in Israel. Shh. Nobody can tell it's actually a swastika you're raising there. And those demonstrations were filled with such slogans, all promoting violence towards women, just like in the weekly hate marches, they promote violence against Jews. Because the people in those protests, those trans protests, are mostly not transgender people. Not really, but rather hateful bullies and people with mental health problems who are taking advantage of this issue, which is a very real and very life-threatening issue for a very tiny minority of the population. It's despicable. Because we all know the truth. There are true transgender people, people with real body dysphoria, who have been through a journey in their whole life, and they take a genuine and sometimes desperate effort to pass as their gender. And then you have the hitchhikers, the attention seekers, the people who just get off on the feeling that they are different and persecuted, even though in 99.9999% of the time, it's white privileged men from upper working class or middle class homes. So basically, you have this dude wearing a dress and calling himself a woman. And sometimes, not even that! Look at that guy!
You're a male transitioning to
Yes.
a woman? So some people watching this might say, why can't you just do what you do, and people respect that and you have freedom to do that, nobody has a problem with it, but why can't you just use the men's toilets? Why do you want to share a toilet with women?
Because it makes me feel comfortable. It makes me feel like whoever I want to be, I can identify with that gender.
That's just a dude saying he wants to use women's spaces because it makes him feel more comfortable. We used to call people like that perverts. But now, if a woman called this obvious man who is obviously not transgender or anything like it, a pervert for wanting to go into women's spaces and pull out his dick, she is the bully and he is the victim. And here's the thing, they present women as the bullies, as this powerful group who is persecuting this tiny minority, but women are a persecuted group. By any measure you throw at it, all over the world. True, less so in the West than in other places, but that doesn't mean it's not true in the West as well. Just ask yourself, how many men are kidnapped and murdered in the West and how many women? How many grooming gangs target men and how many women? How much harassment does a woman suffer from childhood and how much men do? And yeah, men love to say, we have more chances of being murdered in a robbery and all that. And you know what? No, I'm not saying we don't. Hell, as a young man, I knew women who would go out on a Friday night without even taking a wallet because they knew whatever they wanted, they'd find someone to pay for it. And I remember having a female friend and having to explain to her how I would not go through a certain area at night in the city I grew up in because while she won't be touched, I would almost certainly be assaulted, and she couldn't quite get it. So I'm not saying there aren't very nitpicking specific moments when being a woman doesn't have the advantage, but these are rare and far apart. In most things, men have the obvious advantage, both physically and socially. And it's in black and white in every single statistic you look at. Hell, I myself had a friend who was a manager in the tech industry, and he told me one day that he would never hire another woman in his life. Is she not doing a good job, I asked? No, she's actually brilliant, but she's distracting my guys, I can't have that. That's the kind of attitude women still have to deal with in the workplace. God forbid if she wants to dress nice or put on makeup, Jordan Peterson will tell you that must mean she wants every man in the office to fill her up. For fuck's sakes. And again, don't let me break out the statistics on rape, sexual harassment, and molestation. Women are a persecuted group, no matter how you look at it. A targeted group. And yet, they've turned it around and made women the bullies. Take a moment to step back and look at their arguments. Women say they need safe spaces where only women... You know what? I'll make it easier for you. Where only people without penises are allowed to enter because the people with penises are the ones doing all the persecution, and they are told that by wanting that, they are being bigots and bullies. And the language used to tell them that they are bullies is violent and horrible, intimidation tactics. But we live in bizarro land. White is black, right is wrong. And you know who else is a persecuted group? The other group they usually tie into this. Jews. A true minority, only 16 million worldwide in a world of 9 billion people. A Jew is 5 times more likely to be the victim of a hate crime than any other minority on the planet. Our culture has been plagiarized by most of the world, but that's not cultural appropriation. Millions of people go around with Hebrew names, talking about Hebrew texts and Jewish culture, but that's fine. Hell, they'll even tell us that we are the ones stealing someone else's culture. And we are depicted as villains and criminals in both classic and modern pieces, but that's okay. And we are the stars of every single conspiracy theory, but that's okay. When the Scots want independence, that's fine. When the Irish want their island reunited, that's fine. But Jews want their self-determination in their homeland? Fucking racist Zionists! And oh yeah, use the word Zionists now, not Jews. Wink wink. Totally throws everybody off, like putting hearts on Burn the Witch. And the only country in the world who is treated like a huge evil empire, even though it's an inch-by-inch sandbox, and that it's completely acceptable to call for its destruction and the murder of all of its millions of inhabitants, is the Jewish state. Before 1948, there were over 800,000 Jews in the Arab world. Now, there are just a few hundreds. And in Israel, by contrast, without counting the Palestinian territories, 24% of the population are Arabs. Yet Israel is accused of being apartheid and accused of ethnic cleansing. Because regardless of everything, they made us the villains. It's not about reality, it's about perception, propaganda. Jews are the villain, no matter what. And now, so are women. Including the women who participate in hating on Jews. So all is allowed. This is the world we live in now. A world where words mean nothing but how much they can twist the minds of morons. Black is white, up is down, right is wrong, we live in bizarro land. Now here's the thing, it doesn't matter in the immediate sense. What I mean is, people may ask, well, okay, what should we do about it? Well, what we already do. Jews have to fight back, women have to fight back, and just let this wave pass. Because it will. Because the human creature is as predictable as it is stupid. And everything is a fad. And in a century from now, the transgender hitchhikers will have moved to something else. Both women and transgender women will be in a better place, and Israel will still exist. Jewish countries have a tendency to hold on for at least a couple of centuries or so whenever they appear. There's nothing in the immediate future to be done about both of those things, except for standing fast and fighting back. And people are already doing that. But it is good to take note and understand this species and what it is capable of. And maybe more importantly, what it isn't capable of as a whole, which is reason.